Welcome to day 10, everyone. And today we're going to talk about cancer. And this topic might sound a bit intimidating, but we're not becoming oncologists today. The goal is simply to understand how cancer develops and spreads in our body. So let's start right away. What causes cancer? Um, the main cause is mutation, which is basically when something goes wrong in our DNA. DNA is like the instruction manual for our cells, but if it gets mutated or transformed into a weird way, it can really damage our body. Mutations can occur in several ways. First, there are chromosomal abnormalities like trisomy 21, in which there is an extra copy of a chromosome in the 21st chromosomes. Second, there are genetic factors. And this basically means that some people inherit mutations that increase their risk of cancer. Third, there are environmental causes like smoking, which exposes cells to harmful chemicals. When mutated cells keep multiplying, they form tumors. So you can see right here, abnormal cells plus abnormal cells equals tumors. And when these tumors begin spreading and invading other tissues in a process known as metastasis, that's when we call it cancer. And before we continue, we need to talk about something called metaplasia. Metaplasia is when one type of cell changes into another type of cell. And this usually happens because the body is trying to adapt to stress environment, whether that is environmental stress, inflammation, or pathological stress known as smoking. It's basically your body saying like, okay, the environment is very terrible. We have to upgrade these cells to adapt to these environments. But here's the key point: metaplasia is not cancer; it's a benign change, in which we're going to talk about later. This means it doesn't invade or spread to other tissues or organs. However, if the stress continues long enough, it can sometimes increase the risk of cancer later on. So if you look at the image right here, it's basically showing the process of metaplasia. So there's external stimuli, and there's a process known as stratification, and it becomes a squamous metaplasia, which is an example of metaplasia. So they're trying to adopt to the external stimuli they are facing to adopt better. Now, let's talk about tumors. As I said, abnormal cells plus abnormal cells equals tumors. There are two main types of tumors: benign and malignant. A benign tumor is mostly curable and usually harmless. It grows slowly and has a clear boundary, which makes it easier for doctors to remove and discover. And most benign tumors end with the suffix "oma", like fibroma, adenoma, or chondroma. So the nomenclature is for tumors is really important to because it determines what kind of tumor they are. However, malignant tumors, however, are completely different. They are dangerous, they are deadly. They are cancerous, aggressive, and they do not have respective boundaries. They lack clear borders. They invade nearby tissues and can spread to other organs in a process known as metastasis. They can metastasize. In terms of the nomenclature, they include the suffix carcinoma or sarcoma. For example, there's a type of malignant tumor called an adenocarcinoma. And there are exceptions to malignant tumors nomenclature, such as the melanoma, lymphoma, or the mesothelioma. However, you don't have to know all of these exceptions because there are a ton of them. You just have to know that malignant tumors are like the neighbors that break down your fence and move into your house. Um, in contrast with benign tumors, which in which they just stay out and keep their boundaries, keep their hands to themselves. And let's look at the microscopic images of benign and malignant tumors. When scientists look at tumors under a microscope, the difference becomes very clear. As you can see right here, benign tumors usually have organized, structured cells that still look somewhat normal, right? They are really easy to determine, to diagnose. However, malignant tumors look a bit chaotic. They are irregular, crowded, and disorganized, almost like a traffic jam. And this microscopic chaos is one of the key signs doctors use to diagnose cancer. And one of the most dangerous thing about cancer is metastasis. As I said before, it is the process where cancerous cells spread to other tissues or organs. For example, a tumor that starts in the lung might eventually spread to the liver, bones, or the brain. And when that happens, new tumors form in those organs, and they are called secondary tumors or metastatic tumors. And unfortunately, if one cancer metastasizes, the treatment becomes much more difficult. However, although most cancerous cells tend to metastasize, some tumors, such as the basal cell carcinoma, rarely metastasizes. And anyway, since metastasis can kill a person and cause cancer, this shows why early detection is extremely important for malignant tumors. So now let's talk about the steps of metastasis. The first step is called invasion. At this stage, some tumor cells break away from the primary tumor. If you see in the um, yellow, neon green highlighted section, you can see that some primary tumor cells break away from the primary tumor mass and they start invading nearby tissues. Think of it like a group of cells rebelling. And yeah, we don't like this neighborhood anymore. Let's just expand our territory. Next step is the intravasation. This is when cancer cells enter the bloodstream or the lymphatic system. Once inside, they are free to travel anywhere in the body, and the bloodstream basically becomes a transportation system for cancer cells, so they can transport it anywhere to our body. And once these primary tumor cells um, move to the distant organs, they can start secondary tumors, which can be very difficult to cure. Yeah, and once the cancer cells reach a new location, they must exit the bloodstream to enter new organs. And this step is called extravasation. In this step, the cells attach to blood vessel walls, squeeze through the vessel lining, and move into nearby tissues. At this point, the cancer cells have basically arrived in their new homes and they are looking for places to settle in a process inside extravasation known as arrest, adhesion, transmigration, and invasion. So these are the many steps that show extravasation is at its work. Now, the final stage is colonization. This is when cancer cells begin growing into secondary tumors in a new organ. Interestingly, even though many cancer cells travel throughout the body, only a very small number successfully form new tumors. It's kind of ironic, right? Because most tumor cells tend to metastasize. However, only a very small number successfully form new tumors. It's very ironic. Yeah, most of them fail to survive, but the ones that succeed can cause serious complications and even a new type of cancer that can seriously threaten one's life. So, basically to summarize what I just talked about, cancer cells begin with mutations. They begin with mutations, anomalies in cells. And these mutations cause cells to grow uncontrollably, forming tumors. If those tumors become malignant, they can spread throughout the body through metastasis, which can become cancer, involving the steps of invasion, um, intravasation, extravasation, and colonization. Understanding these steps helps scientists develop better ways to detect, prevent, and treat cancer. Who knows? You might in the future be oncologists who can cure cancer and diagnose one. Anyways, thank you for listening, and I will return with a new concept next time. Thank you.